You know, since the dawn of time, man has collected things, from cool rocks to cars to Pokemon, even disgusting things like human skulls, toenail clippings, and Funko Pops. There are even some weirdos who like to collect CRTs and stuff. What a bunch of morons those guys are, huh? Either way, there have always been companies or individuals looking to cash in on the next kind of collectible product. And for every one that succeeds, there are a dozen others that fail and nobody remembers. And with that in mind, meet Pocketware, PC games distributed on weirdly sized CDs designed to be pocketable for some reason. According to the creator of this format, SelectSoft, this is, and I quote, the most exciting new introduction to the CD-ROM software market since the invention of CD-ROMs. Now, this was released onto the market in October 2002, selling in retail stores like Toys R Us, Fry's, CompUSA, and even online stores like Amazon.com. So most of these CDs come with these little hangy bits when they're brand new, so I can only assume this was something designed to be put up near a cash register, designed to be an impulse buy that you spend like $5 on. Now, you're probably thinking, oh, this is some kind of weird shareware thing, but these are, in fact, full versions of the games. Let's address the actual format, though. If you looked on the Pocketware website, you'd think it was something that they came up with or invented, but the reality is this was something that had already existed, and it's basically just a CD that they cut up in a weird way. You can actually buy these same CDs as CDRs, or at least you used to be able to, and they're usually called something like business card CDs or something, and they hold about 50 to 80 megabytes. Regardless of this format existing in other forms, it's the first time I've ever seen it used for game distribution, so that does still make it semi-unique. Not that there was that many games released in it. When this came out, there were 12 titles released under a name called GameSoft, which I assume is owned by the SelectSoft publisher. And then there were another 6 games which were fully licensed Atari arcade games, and those came out a year after the original games came out. And that was the total number of games ever released under this weird Pocketware name before it disappeared completely. There isn't much information around about this series, but it was pretty much done in 2004. The website itself, I believe, was shut down in 2005, and then there's no news articles or anything, so I assume it flopped really hard. Now, SelectSoft was actually a pretty big publisher at the time. They had about 800 titles in their CD-ROM lineup, including some Capcom arcade titles, so I can't help but think that if this would have been a little bit more successful, that maybe they would have released some of those titles as well. Retrospectively, though, these are kind of cool. They're about the size of a trading card, and I feel like they would be semi-attractive if you had a collection of them. And since there are only 18 games, I figured I would give this the same treatment I give the Galaxy of Games videos. And let's see if any of these games released on this thing are still worth playing. So there are 18 games in total released on these cute little CDs. I don't own all of them in physical form, but thankfully they've all been uploaded to archive.org. I do have 6 of them though, so I'm going to try those first. As I mentioned previously, these were all listed at an MSRP of $4.99, so I thought it might be fun to make an assessment for each game to see if they were even remotely worth that price. I will use the following 3-point scale of judgment. Worth $5. Maybe worth $5, and definitely not worth $5. To play these, I'm going to be using Windows XP today with my HP DC 5850, since the packaging on all of these brag XP compatibility, which was the new hotness at the time. Some of these games also use 3D acceleration, so I figured this machine would have the best chance of playing them at decent frame rates. Tell you one thing, sticking these things in a CD-ROM tray still somehow feels wrong, but I'm happy to report they work just fine. But without further ado, let's talk about our first game, which is Trax, The Robot Wars. Like the name implies, this is a robot combat game that is likely inspired by the real-life Robot Wars competitions and the TV series BattleBots. Personally, I always quite enjoyed watching these competitions. The designs those teams came up with weren't always effective, but they sure were interesting. Watching them tear each other apart even in one-sided matches was always entertaining as well. So I think the concept of a video game based around this is quite sound, and this may be one of the first attempts at a video game adaptation. Good concepts don't always equal a good game, and in my opinion, that's very much the case here. This is an exciting idea with boring execution. However, the real-time 3D graphics and design deserve some praise, especially considering this game was a one-man effort. There are 11 unique body types to choose for your robot, along with different types of weapons each one of them can use. Additionally, there are multiple different arenas, each with their own hazards, but they ultimately end up being more or less the same. At the main menu, you're given a choice of 3 game modes: Ascent, Battle, and Tournament. The Ascent mode is a series of preset battles you need to win in succession. Failure results in restarting the entire thing from the beginning. Yay. It starts off with a mind-numbingly easy level, which you're given a saw blade weapon that can shred your opponent in seconds. The very next level gives you a weaponless, weird, floaty hovercraft that controls like it's on ice in a completely unfair 2v1. This is one of the most ridiculous difficulty spikes I've ever seen. The only reasonable way I can see of winning this is utilizing some cheese foo and tricking the CPU to run itself off the edge of the arena. I tried to win this about half a dozen times, but I got tired of repeating the first level. The other 2 game modes are custom matches with very similar rules. The battle mode allows you to pick any robot you want and gives you a set amount of money to spend on upgrades and weapons for your bot. Whoever wins 5 rounds first is the winner. The tournament mode is basically the same thing with the exception that you start without upgrades. You earn money by winning rounds and get to spend it every 3 rounds instead of at the beginning. Upgrades are a mixed bag and aren't balanced particularly well. Engine upgrades allow you to more easily knock opponents out of the arena or into hazards, and having any type of weapon means you can just spam attacks at point blank range to drain hit points. Some upgrades also cancel each other out, so combinations are limited. Being outmatched with the CPU having more upgrades doesn't give you much of a chance either, especially if they are faster. The hovercraft robots also seem to always be at an extreme disadvantage, and there isn't much of a reason to pick many of the weirder designs. The worst part about all of this to me is attacks and collisions have no weight or impact. It all just feels like driving some bumper cars rather than robotic combat. If that was corrected and a career mode or some type of reasonable campaign was added, this might be a better game. As is, it's very bare bones and feels incomplete. I don't think this would have entertained me much in 2002, let alone now, but maybe it's just not my cup of tea. Is it worth $5? I'm gonna say no. I'm sure this game has some fans somewhere, but I didn't get much joy out of it personally. Next up is Space Racers, which is not the real name of the game on the disc. A very good percentage of these Pocketware titles have completely different names, which just screams high effort, right? This one is actually called Rocky Racers, and is very similar to other top-down combat racers like Death Rally, but with spaceships rather than cars. The tracks are circuits of varying complexity, lined with asteroids as walls. You can bounce out of these barriers as well, but a checkpoint system keeps you from going off-road and winning via cheesy methods. Each ship is equipped with a gun with a low rate of fire that can destroy enemy ships if you land enough shots. But perhaps more useful is the tractor beam that you can use to slow the forward momentum of ships in front of you. Destroying ships isn't really worth the effort due to the number of shots it takes, and it doesn't have much payoff since they just respawn anyway. Scattered along the way, there are simple power-ups that give you stuff like temp speed boosts and invincibility, but nothing too crazy or overpowered that would make it unfair. This is a fun, skill-based racer that is quite entertaining once you get used to the slightly slippery controls. It has network play as well, which gives it a bit more mileage in multiplayer. The tracks are nearly visually identical, and the music is decent boomer dad rock, although there are only 2 songs in total. The one used when racing sounds almost identical to Ace of Spades by Motorhead.
Race in space, you know I like to gamble when I race in space, yeah.
Overall, this one is decent. It still feels a bit light on content, and the 9 included tracks are repetitive, but if you enjoy this style of racing game, this isn't the worst $5 you'll ever spend. I say it's worth it. Sticking with space themes, next we have Star Miner, which is made by the same company Positech, and some of the ships in this game even resemble those in Rocky Racers. I covered this in my last video on Galaxy of Games Red, and trying to track down a full version of this game is how I stumbled down this Pocketware rabbit hole to begin with. If you missed that video, at its core, Star Miner, also known as Asteroid Miner, is a simple but great little game where you fly around, mine for minerals, sell for profit, and upgrade your ship. No real complaints about the gameplay itself, but the alleged full version here is even more limited than the eGames one. After you complete the first level, you are taken to a screen that thanks you for playing this demo. Next, you're dumped into an empty level you can't progress past. The menu says it's the full version, whereas the eGames version was called Light, but ironically had more levels. Is it worth $5? Well, this broken version sure isn't, because it's a demo. Seems like a major blunder on the publisher's part, and I absolutely recommend Star Miner, just not the Pocketware release. Shifting gears a bit, the next one is called Mega Pinball. Now, PC pinball games are a big favorite of mine, and I cut my teeth on Epic Pinball, Pinball Dreams Deluxe, and of course the classic Space Cadet table by Maxis. So believe me when I say, this is just a terrible game that pales in comparison to every single one of those games. I think gameplay-wise, even Marath's Cyberball is miles ahead of this. It appears most of the effort that was put into this game was graphical presentation. Oddly, the menu system looks as if it was inspired by the early Thief games. The 3 included tables themselves look decent enough and have an early 2000s pre-rendered look, although this table looks like it has boobs for some reason. The layout and design of the tables is what is lackluster. Most of the ramps are covered and don't even give you the satisfaction of seeing the ball move around, and the physics are extremely stiff. I also feel as if sound design and music are an important aspect of pinball games, but very little effort was made here in that regard. The sounds are just stock samples, and there is no music to be found. No sound at all is almost marginally less awkward than what is here. Suffice to say, for $5, this would be a major disappointment and waste of money, especially since the free shareware version of Epic Pinball is an infinitely better use of your time. Next up is Chess Compendium 3D, or its true name, EG Chess. It is indeed a chess game in full 3D with a mouse or keyboard controlled camera. It's not the most beautiful 3D in the world, but it's functional. The default medium difficulty, at least to a chess noob like me, is relentless, but adjustable challenge isn't a bad thing. The strangest thing about this game is the music. At best, it's avant-garde. At worst, it's bad music.
I've got my pitchfork load.
Not much else to say. Everybody knows what chess is, but have you ever heard of Sir Bommalot? It's included as an extra on this same disc, and it's a strange chess variant with 7 unique piece types that have some rather strange abilities compared to vanilla chess. It also incorporates some elements of checkers, as pieces are taken by jumping over them in most circumstances. Unlike chess, you don't win by regicide, but rather by moving any two pieces all the way across the board into the blue or red goal areas. The rules of the movesets for all the pieces themselves are sort of difficult to explain without just playing a round of the game for yourself. There are bomb pieces which can self-destruct to destroy everything around them. Freezer pieces can prevent enemies from moving. Pushers can kill enemies by pushing them off the board. And there's even a mimic that can copy the abilities of your opponent's last moved piece. This is an imaginative game, and one that likely has many strategies to explore and enough difficulty settings to keep you challenged. It unfortunately still has the same horrible music, but at least you can turn it off. You get 2 games for the price of 1 here, and if you are already planning on spending $5 on a simple computer chess game, I guess it's fine. It's a little rough around the edges, graphically especially, and any of the Chessmaster games from the time blow this out of the water in more ways than one. So I'll give this one a maybe. Next up is 5-Card Drop. I went into this one fully expecting a forgettable solitaire or poker game. While I wasn't entirely incorrect with that assumption, this is kind of a card game, but the way it's played is unexpected. Simply put, this is Tetris with cards. Matches are achieved by lining up cards that form poker hands horizontally, vertically, and even diagonally for extra points. There are 3 different game modes: free play, survival, and challenge. In free play, a full deck of 52 cards will drop each round, and if you can keep up with the overflow, you move on to the next round, which will be faster. The survival mode is an endless mode, but the speed increases as more cards are added to the board. Matches will slow down the drop speed temporarily, and the more complex hands you can score, the more effective that slowdown is. Lastly, the challenge mode is the same as free play, but it sets objectives that you must complete. Honestly, a very cool twist on the falling block game formula. Back in 2002, I don't think I would have ever considered even buying this because the packaging just looks like a generic card game. It still really feels like a shareware title in many ways, and like most of these, is kind of questionable as a standalone commercial game. So, for sure an maybe type thing, but I think it's still worth playing, just maybe not for $5. So that concludes the games that I have physical copies of. So these next 12 are from archive.org. Firstly, this is Puppies, a side-scrolling platformer featuring 2 puppies who have their snoots rotated 90 degrees at all times. In many ways, the platforming elements and graphics remind me of Scunny Back to the Forest. While the controls aren't as greasy as that game, thank goodness, there's still some weird forward momentum that can be difficult to control. The 2 different characters named Pawn and Puppies play identically, and if one loses all its health, you play as the other. This is used instead of a life system. If you lose both puppies, it's game over without any continues. However, the overflow from health items scattered in every level can be used to revive a fallen puppy. So as long as you can find those, you get another chance after death. There are 6 different zones that are broken up into 2 sections, much like the original Sonic games. So in total, you have 12 levels to blast through without dying. Despite cutesy appearances, this is a brutally difficult game. The objective in each level is pure survival. You just need to make it to the end. The level design is good. Many of them have multiple paths to the exit, and none of them really feel the same. The enemy design is what makes this game so treacherous. Particularly these damn birds that are scripted to fly at you with the intensity of LGR trying to find another copy of Depth Dwellers. You aren't helpless to most enemies, you can stomp on their heads in most circumstances. However, the bird, for instance, matches your speed so you can't run away, and there's a knockback when hit, so it's easy to just get stun locked and lose all your health. Some enemies or hazards come at you so fast that level memorization is key in many circumstances, which is not ideal for a game where death is so unforgiving. That said, this is one of the more polished games released for Pocketware. In many ways, it feels like a console game from the SNES or Genesis era. I do wish it was playable at higher resolutions. The default ones are oddly low for a Windows game, and it doesn't even support 640 by 480. But that's a pretty minor complaint. Everything else about this game is pretty well made. The music and sound are especially great. The MIDI soundtrack is awesome. This is one of the few games on Pocketware I can recommend without too much hesitation. I'm sure those who played this game as a kid remember it fondly, so definitely worth $5. Moving on, this one is called AutoBahn Racing. Or is it? No, it's actually called Midnight Racing, because of course it is. Regardless, this is a 3D racing arcade-style game that gives off "we have Need for Speed at home" vibes. Obviously, there are no licensed vehicles, but there are some neat-looking cars with differing specs and paint customization. There's even 2 unlockable cars if you complete the championship mode, which is almost impossible due to reasons I will discuss in a bit. Like the name suggests, all 10 tracks in the game take place at night, and they aren't circuits either, but rather illegal street races on traffic-filled highways. And oh boy, the traffic. The AI for both the CPU racers and civilian traffic is crazy unpredictable. On some tracks, there are choke points where there will be huge car pileups that are literally impossible to go around. You also start every race in last place, with some cars being over 200 meters in front of you, and it will take some distance to overtake them. That means if an impassable car pileup happens while they're in front, you're never going to win. On the later tracks, which are fairly long endurance races, these pileups happen almost 80% of the time, at least at some point in the race. The driving physics are serviceable, but honestly, I don't think much effort was put into testing this game properly before release. There are many weird collision bugs and cars getting stuck inside each other that is yet another thing that can ruin a race or make it impossible to complete. In the championship mode, you're given unlimited retries for each track, which alleviates some of this, but as I mentioned, the later races are very lengthy, so this is frustrating. Strangely, there is a primitive damage model included too that can render your car quote-unquote undrivable if crashed enough times. The funny part is some of the time you can just stick it to the man and keep driving anyway, even with what the game calls an undrivable car.
Don't you ever tell me how to live my life again.
Damage won't knock you out of a race completely, however. You can simply respawn. Now, I know I've been negative for the most part here, but this game does have some good points, especially for how cheap it was. Graphically, the game is fairly decent, especially compared to everything else we've looked at here today. While all of the tracks look virtually identical due to the night setting, there are some nice models, lens flares, and lighting effects for $99 when this game was made. The tracks that work properly are fun to play. This isn't a horrible game in short sessions, even if the later tracks just feel like more hellish versions of Toad's Turnpike from Mario Kart. Hot take maybe, but I think it would be worth $5 for its day. It's entertaining and has enough meat on the bones to feel like a proper game, despite the bugs. Keep in mind, I'm someone who played the PC version of Test Drive 6 to death as a kid, which most seem to hate, so maybe my judgment in this area isn't the best. Next is another 3D game made by the same folks behind Mega Pinball. This is Perfect Pool. Obviously, this is a billiards game, and while it is a considerably better game than Mega Pinball, it again feels a bit lackluster in some areas. The gameplay and mouse controls are spot on, and it's a very easy game to pick up and play. You take shots by pushing the mouse forward, and the speed of that momentum affects the power of said shot. The balls move with a decent amount of realism, and you can even knock balls off the table if you hit them too hard. By default, there are markers which show the trajectory of the ball based on how you are aiming. Using this, you can mindlessly hit some ridiculous shots, and even beat the higher difficulty AI without much effort. As for some of its weaker points, there's only one game type. Straight pool is the only mode, and there isn't even a standard game of 8-ball, which seems strange for a paid product dedicated to billiards. Like Mega Pinball, it could really do well with some music. The graphics aren't bad and are very smooth, even if the background set pieces look a bit goofy. It's far from as hateable as Mega Pinball, but it's also just a very bare bones game. Some more variation in game modes and music would have made it so much better. As far as being worth $5, I'll give it a strong maybe. Next up is Space Defender, which predictably, yet again, is actually called something else. The true name of this is Space Tripper, although admittedly Space Defender seems a bit more fitting since it very much resembles the arcade classic Defender by Williams. The controls are almost identical to Defender. You move up and down and switch directions with the press of a button. Inspirations aside, it's not a straight clone and does offer up some enhancements from the original. The playing field is more arena-like than Defender. The perspective is top-down rather than side-scrolling, and there are inclines that add a bit of depth. Each level has a set number of enemies that must be dispatched in a certain amount of time. It maintains an arcade-level difficulty with a limit of 3 starting lives, and any mistake means death that requires you to start a level over. That said, the controls are tight, so if you lose, it's your own fault for being bad. You have 2 different weapons to choose from that can be upgraded independently by collecting power-ups that drop. One fires a powerful single shot ahead, and the other is a less powerful spread shot for crowd control. I'm too bad at the game to say how many levels there are, but I can confirm there are boss fights. These appear to have some thought put into movement patterns and are well designed. For an old 3D game, I think the cartoony graphics have aged well, and this is above average production for a shovelware title. This one for sure is worth $5, but it's not for the faint of heart as the difficulty is quite high. Next up is yet another arcade title with a high difficulty. This is Star Scrambler or Astro Assembler. Yet again, the name on the packaging doesn't reflect the real game. This is a rather complex shmup bullet hell that has a 90s Gundam Japanese-inspired aesthetic. But the developer Advanced Projects is from Spain, I believe. The main gimmick is revealed in the title, that collecting an array of parts allows you to assemble ships with better firepower on the fly. I'm not going to lie, I was only able to do this once while playing the game, and I lost before I could switch to the ship. This is an incredibly difficult game, and has so many moving and distracting elements that make it even more tricky. It uses animated 3D background elements and enemies that constantly pop in and out of the back and foreground. It looks awesome, but it's a bit overwhelming, at least to me. You also have 2 different weapons, a laser that does damage to air targets, and a missile weapon that destroys ground targets. Weapons and movement speed can also be upgraded by collecting power-ups. The default movement speed is dreadfully slow, and some upgrades are lost when you lose a life. So obviously sometimes you lose that extra movement. That's really the only thing I find irksome with the game in general, other than me being horrible at it. Well, that and it uses the O, P, Q, and A keys for movement by default, which seems like a psychopath configuration. Despite my inability to play it well, which seems like a pattern today, I always kept coming back for more, trying again, and getting a little further each time. Unfortunately, doing a bit of research, this is a gimped version of the game. This copy has the music completely removed to fit on this stupid little disc, which is a shame because looking at gameplay here on YouTube, the music is great. Another cool thing I discovered after a bit of research is that 15 years after this initial PC version came out, The game was released as a real arcade cabinet in 2016. Have any of you played it? Let me know in the comments below. But yeah, I think this game is worth $5 and then some. Just maybe not the Pocketware version. A shmup without music seems like a crime. Next is the last game in the original GameSoft lineup, which is a bit underwhelming, but being a completionist, I should mention it. This is Reversi, or Smashing Reversi, and drum roll please, it's Reversi. I mean, it does have network play and is fine for what it is, but $5 for a Reversi game, I'm gonna say that's not worth it, at least to me. Next up is the Atari collections, which came out a year after the games we just talked about. These consist of enhanced ports of Asteroids, Super Breakout, Centipede, Battlezone, Missile Command, and Tempest. These are good ports. All of them, with the exception of Battlezone and Tempest, also have the option to play with enhanced upscaled graphics as well. They do use some really icky looking scanline filters by default, which is a choice, but you can turn it off. All of them include interactive cabinet art as well, which mimics the real machines. Not much to say about these really, everybody knows these games. We also know that clones for the most part existed for free and were known to the PC shareware warriors among us long before these arrived. These were clearly a nostalgia product and not really a good value any way you slice it for $5 per game. SelectSoft were really banking on the impulse buy collectability for the sale of this line in particular. Even if you wanted to play these original games and not some cheesy shareware knockoff, the Atari Anniversary Collection had already been out for a couple years and was cheaper and a more cohesive collection with a ton of extras. So these are a no, not worth $5. Although they appear to have held their value more than any other Pocketware games on the secondhand market, so that's something, I guess. And that, my friends, is all Pocketware had to offer. This was a failed gimmick that probably ended up in clearance bins almost as fast as it was released. Still, some of the games weren't too bad, right? And you have to admit the format is kind of adorable. Anyway, that's a wrap for this video today. If you like this, you'll probably enjoy my other shareware or game content, as well as my other vintage PC stuff. So subscribe or check that out if it interests you. And with that, I'll leave you with this list of my lovely patrons and members, and I hope to see you in the next one.